Welcome to the Therapist HQ, your weekly pep talk for private practice pros. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Therapist HQ. My name is Alicia Murray, and as always, I am so glad that you're here and so glad that we get to spend this time together today. I'm very excited because today we are going to be talking about something that I think maybe is quietly holding a lot of therapists back, and I think a lot of them don't even realize that it's happening. So before we get into it, quick little catch up. Many of you have seen that I have relaunched a lot of my products onto our very new own piece of the internet. TherapistHQ.co now has a permanent place on the internet, and this is where all of my guides and courses and freebies will be going forward. We are still migrating a few things over, but in the next couple weeks, everything will fully be over there. Our launch kit has gotten a remodel and is now a course with 65 lessons in it. I have a Find Your Niche and Fill Your Practice course. I have our new and improved HQ community, which takes care of all of your marketing in less than an hour a week. Very exciting. I will talk a little bit more about that stuff at the end, but I am still living in a little bit of relaunch bliss, having put so much work into upgrading these products for everyone and just making sure that all of the information is up to date with the changing times and is, put out in a way that makes it easy for people to implement. Because at the end of the day, I want this process to be as smooth sailing as possible for everybody who has trusted me to be alongside them in this journey. So let's dive in, shall we? So last week, we talked about fear. We unpacked my fears going into private practice, the financial ones, the logistical ones, the identity ones. And we walked through a tool that was called the fear inventory that you can use to take your own fears apart and figure out what's actually true versus what your brain is filling in. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I would definitely go back and start there. Not because you have to, but because I think that what we're talking about today really builds on it in a way that I think will just maybe land a little bit harder and better if you have that context from the episode last week. So because today we're talking about all of this readiness and specifically the story that readiness is something that happens to you before you start, which I think we will easily be able to debunk. And also the idea that there is a moment coming, maybe some future version of yourself who has more experience, more savings, more confidence, more trainings, more certainty. And that version of you is the one who is actually allowed to do this. I want to talk about where that story is coming from and why it's costing you more than you think. And also how to figure out whether you are actually more ready than you're giving yourself credit for. And like I said in the beginning, this episode is really for anybody who is thinking about starting their practice or in the thick of doing the startup. But also, it is for anybody who is looking to add things to their practice, right? Maybe you're looking to add groups or an intensive or additional streams of income. And I think that this feeling of not feeling ready can expand to all of those versions of ourselves in our business. At the end of this episode, I am going to walk you through what I call the readiness reality check. So this is going to be just a quick set of questions that you can sit with that will help you get honest about what you're actually waiting for and whether that bar is real or whether maybe we invented it a little bit. So let's get into it. So here's the thing about readiness and a hard truth that I have certainly learned with readiness over the years is that nobody is going to give it to you. There is no moment where someone taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, now here it is. Like now you're ready. You've put the time in, you have the credentials, you've seen enough clients and surely written enough notes and treatment plans, sat through all the supervision hours. Now you can go build something on your own. Unfortunately, for many of us who are struggling with not feeling ready, this moment doesn't come. And the longer you wait for it, the more you start to realize that you've been waiting for something that was never on its way. I want to tell you about where I was before I launched my practice because I just think that it matters for this conversation. And you know that I love sharing my story with everyone just to sort of normalize these struggles that I think a lot of folks go through. I was your typical burnt out community mental health therapist, and I was also pregnant with my first son. I was working 30 to 60 hours a week. I was picking up side jobs to make ends meet and also to start to save a little nest egg for private practice because I just felt like the salary I was making was not reflecting all of the work that I was putting in, and it just wasn't enough. I know a lot of you, feel that feeling. And I'd been thinking about private practice, obviously, for a few years at that point. Like it was on the bucket list, like in my phone for many years. But before I truly sat down and started building in 2019, I kept finding reasons why the timing wasn't right yet. I told myself that I needed more experience first. I told myself that I needed a bigger savings cushion. I told myself that maybe I should wait until after we start a family and after I settle into a new chapter. I told myself that I would know when I was ready, but I just knew that I wasn't there yet. And here's what I know now that I wish I had known then. I don't think I was waiting until I was ready. I was waiting because starting all of this felt really scary. And I think saying I'm just not ready yet was a more comfortable thing to say than I'm afraid. I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z happening. I am afraid of cue every fear that we talked about during last episode. And as we all know, those are two very different things. And learning to tell them apart definitely changed and shifted a lot for me and continues to change a lot for me. Obviously, throughout my over 6 years of owning a private practice, I have diversified my income. I have added consulting. I have grown into a group practice. I have added groups to my practice. And before starting any of those changes, I still find myself back in that thought trap of like, I just don't think I'm ready for this yet. And having to truly sit down with myself and check myself of where are these thoughts coming from? And are you truly not ready? So where does this readiness myth come from? Because I don't think it's random and I don't think it's anybody's fault that we're carrying it. A lot of it can come from the culture of our training. We spend a lot of years in graduate school being evaluated, supervised, assessed. We're trained in environments where someone else is always determining whether we're competent enough to move on to the next. And of course, that is very appropriate and needed when we're a student, and the oversight exists for very good reason. But I think that we could maybe be internalizing that structure. We start to believe that there is always supposed to be someone above us who gives us permission to take that next step. And then we get our license, which is a literal piece of paper and credential that says you are qualified to practice independently. But I think sometimes we can still find ourselves looking around for someone to tell us that we're allowed to. The license is the permission to practice, and many of you already have that. The other place that I think this readiness myth sort of comes from is from comparison. That's a big one. And this one can be sneaky because it doesn't always look like comparison. It sometimes just looks like being realistic. It looks like we just want to be responsible and not overestimate ourselves, right? But what's actually happening is that we're looking at therapists who are 5, 10, 15 years into their private practice, and we're measuring our beginnings against their middles. We're seeing the full waiting room, the confident online presence, and the group practice that they've built. And we're thinking, I'm not there yet. So I just must not be ready, without recognizing that every single one of those therapists also had a day one. They all had an empty calendar and a Psychology Today profile that they obsessively refreshed and updated and changed, and moments where they had no idea if this was going to work, me included. It's important when we start making these comparisons that we remember that we are not behind. We're just earlier in the journey than they are. So I want to talk about what this waiting, so this readiness fallacy that is making us wait, and what that could actually be costing us, because I think that we treat waiting like it's the safe option, right? Like staying put and staying neutral is safe and moving forward is the risk. But waiting definitely has a cost too. I think that it's just a cost that's a bit easier to ignore because it is seen in like small micro doses rather than all at once, like a big change would be seen. Every month that we stay in a position that is underpaying us, burning us out, not aligned with what we actually want, it's a month of income that we're not building for ourselves. It's a month of clients that we're not working with on our own terms. And it's a month of energy, valuable energy, going into someone else's practice instead of our own. And I want you to actually think about this for a second. If you've been thinking about private practice for 6 months, how much has waiting cost you? Not just financially, though that does matter, but in your energy, in your sense of possibility, in the version of yourself you're trying to get back to, the one who chose this profession because you believed that it could be everything for you. And waiting feels safe. Waiting feels like a very safe place to be, but it certainly isn't without cost if it's stopping us from going after something that we really want. So, what does it really feel like to be ready? I think that a lot of you are maybe holding your breath, waiting for me to give you that permission, like we talked about, to say, you have X, Y, and Z, and so you are ready. But I don't think that readiness is necessarily a feeling more than it is a decision. Because I think that there are some signs, some very real concrete signs, that you are more ready than you're telling yourself that you are. The first sign, big one, is that you already know how to do the clinical work. You know how to sit with a client, you know how to hold space, to ask the right questions, to navigate a crisis, to write a treatment plan, to document a session. The core of what private practice requires. The actual therapy is something that you are already doing. And private practice doesn't make you a better clinician overnight. It just changes where your paycheck is coming from and changes the environment that you're working in. The second sign of readiness is that you have been almost ready or teetering on feeling ready for more than a few months. Because here's the thing, if the barrier to starting were genuinely logistical, you would have solved it by now or had a timeline in place to have it solved by now. Logistics are very solvable. If it's been 6 months and you're still in the same place, still feeling like you need just a little bit more time, a little bit more preparation, it's not necessarily a logistics problem, but a fear problem. And the fear doesn't go away by waiting, it goes away by pushing yourself to move through it. And a third sign of readiness is that things that you think you need to know before you start are things that you can absolutely learn as you go. You do not need to understand every aspect of running a business before you open your doors. You definitely need to know enough to take the first step and then the next step and the next step after that. But the learning in private practice is not front loaded. I don't know anybody who goes into private practice knowing every single step they need to take at every single time and being able to just sprint through that. This type of learning and adapting and adjusting happens in real time as real situations arise, and that is okay. If we think about it, that's how a lot of learning happens is, while we are in the process of it. So I want to move into the readiness reality check now because you guys know I just love to give you things to walk away with. And I want you to either save this for later or actually engage with it now if this is something that you have been struggling with. So you can grab something to write if you want to. You don't have to. You can just sort of listen and reflect on it for yourself. So the first question that I have for you is, what specifically am I waiting for? And not in vague terms, but very specifically, tangibly. If you can't name it, that is important information on its own because vague readiness is often just fear that is branded a little bit better. The second question that I have for you is the bar real or did I set it myself? P.S. Guilty of this for me. Okay. Because sometimes the bar is legitimate. You're waiting to finish supervised hours. You're saving a specific amount. You're waiting for a genuine life circumstance to shift. But sometimes the bar can be arbitrary. You told yourself you needed 3 years of experience or a certain number of clinical hours or waiting until your kids hit a certain age. And nobody actually told you that that was a prerequisite to all of this, but it's something that you decided. And because you decided it, you can also decide something different. The third question is, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail at this? I know that question can sound kind of cliche, especially talking to a room full of therapists, but I want you to really answer it and not like the philosophical version. Like, I want you to answer the practical version. Like, if failure were completely off the table, what first step would you be taking this week? Because Whatever you just thought of, that is available to you right now. The fourth question I have for you is, what does another 6 months of waiting actually cost me? Not hypothetically, but specifically in income and energy and the life that I'm trying to build. I want you to really try to put a real number on it and make it as concrete as possible, because abstract waiting, I think, can feel manageable. But when we're actually calculating what another year at your current salary costs versus another year emotionally and logistically at a community mental health agency versus what you could be doing in your own private practice, I think that what we are comfortable with can stop feeling like such a safe option in our mind. And the fifth question I have for you, and this is, I think, one that I would want you to sit with the longest. I know this is one that I like to sit with the longest, is what do I already know how to do? What I don't know yet, because I imagine that we're all very good at reminding ourselves what we don't know yet. But what do I already know? Because I think that a lot of us, when we're in the grip of the readiness myth, we focus entirely on our gaps. We make a mental list of everything we don't know, courses that we need, lessons that we need, CEUs that we need, and we use that as evidence that we're not ready. But what if we made this other list? What if we are inventorying what we already have? So, skills, training, clinical experience, our own human capacity to figure things out as they come. And we let that be evidence instead. The biggest takeaway from all of this is that readiness is not a feeling, especially when it comes to making business decisions and starting or growing or adding to our private practice. Readiness is rooted in decision. And I would put myself out there to say that I think that if you're listening to this, you might be closer to feeling ready than maybe you think you are. What if you could tell every new client exactly what their insurance would reimburse before the first session ever even started? That is not a hypothetical. That is Mentaya. Mentaya's instant benefits checker gives you and your client real numbers at intake, what their plan covers, what they can expect back, no phone calls to insurance, and no waiting days for a callback. Just clear information right when you need it. And after each session, Mentaya handles claim submission automatically. So you're not chasing paperwork or explaining super bills to every client who asks. For practitioners who want to be out of network without making it a second job, Mentaya is genuinely the simplest path there. You can start your 30-day free trial at mentaya.com and use their benefits checker on your website free for 30 days using code TherapistHQ. Before I let you go for today, I do want to revisit something that I said at the top of this podcast episode, which is that I'm not ready is often a more comfortable thing to say than I feel afraid. And I want to sit with that for just a second before we close out. Because if that landed for you, if you heard that and feel something shift in you, I really just want you to know that having that fear is okay. And having that fear certainly doesn't disqualify you from this whole realm of private practice or business or growing your practice. The fear does not mean that you are wrong about this or that this isn't for you or you should keep waiting until it goes away. It just means that this matters to you and it is important to you. And things that matter to us are sometimes worth having a little bit of fear about losing, fear about messing up. The therapists who have built the practices they love, the ones with the full caseloads and the aligned clients and the schedules that actually fit their lives, they were not necessarily fearless. They were afraid and they were doing it anyway. And that is something that you can also join us in doing. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that you know about 2 ways that I can support you beyond this podcast. If you are sitting with these questions right now and feeling like, okay, I think I might actually be ready, but I have no idea where to start, this is exactly what the Complete Launch Kit is for. It's a step-by-step course with 65 lessons that walks you through every single piece of building your private practice from the ground up. Forming your LLC, setting your rates, getting your systems in place, building your marketing foundation, seeing your first client, nothing falls through the cracks, and you never have to wonder what comes next. I will have that linked in the show notes for you. And if you're already in private practice, but your marketing is the thing that's keeping your caseload from being where you want it, that is what the HQ community is for. It's a done-for-you marketing system for private practice therapists, and every week you get social media prompts and blog post prompts, so you always know what to put out there. Every month, I can personally review your website or your directory profiles and send you written feedback. And you get access to a full library of expert trainings, a full template and script library, and the HQ GPT, which is an AI tool specifically built for private practice marketing that can take a prompt and hand you back a polished caption, blog, or newsletter in minutes. All of that for $37 a month. And again, I will link that in the show notes for you. All right, friends, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week.